Now, one thing to go over, regardless of which difficulty you're going to be running in Final Fight 2, is that your game level depends on how difficult your fights with enemies are going to go. With easy and normal, your attacks are going to be dealing maximized damage, whereas if you're playing on hard or expert, your attacks against certain enemies are going to be less. Most bosses, except for Philippe, will have more added defenses, so your attacks on those enemies will not work as favorable as they did in the lower levels. Some of the enemies, namely the Andoris, Johnny and Atlas, Elias and um, Elliot and Joe, all have enhanced defenses, so they take less damage than your typical generic enemies like the generics, the thugs, the acrobat knife wielders, and the elix. So in other words, those enemies will take less damage as well as the bosses, except for Philippe. But we usually run on easy, but regardless, what I'm going to be showing you on the guides, you definitely want to be putting that up with, regardless as to what you're going to be doing, because it's going to be applied. Also, Murphigator is the one that found out about the damage formula, but I'm a little bit worried that I don't have permission to discuss that on stream. I will not be discussing the overall damage, but I will give you some hints as to what you can expect, which attacks will do what. And I will give you my own estimate thoughts as to what you can expect to see with any of the other characters. But anyway, I'm going to assign my extra joy to A, but you can assign it to either the shoulder buttons or X. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and cover Haggar first. Go ahead and create a restore point. So anyway, Haggar is the only character returning from Final Fight 1. And technically he is way improved as opposed to what he was in Final Fight 1. For one thing, forward jump is now better. And you'll definitely want to be jumping more than walking most of the time. So you can definitely tell it doesn't matter whether or not you do backward jumping or forward jumping because they're the same speed. That's one big massive improvement for all the playable characters in Final Fight 2 as opposed to Final Fight 1 where your forward jump was pretty much slow as molasses and not reliable. Also, given the fact enemies will not attack you while doing a forward jump is kind of a good thing, but that doesn't mean enemies will attack you. But anyway, let's go ahead and start covering the move list first. But before I do that, Haggar does indeed have much improvement. He still retains being the slowest among the 3 playable characters, but he's still pretty good. And he still has the highest... A lot of his attacks deal very high damage overall. So when you're playing as Haggar, you do need to know that he's not going to be very fast, but you could still implement a massive amount of damage with this character, regardless. In fact, most of his high damaging attacks will come from his throws, and his extra joy has pretty much evenly based with some of the other ones. But anyway, let's go over the basics. We'll go over the chain attack first. This is Haggar's primary damage dealer. On some occasions, you can deal like 3 hits, which is 2 body blows followed up with a sledgehammer swing. Depending on how fast you doing your button presses, you might get 1 or 2 additional hits in addition to your 3-hit combo, but you shouldn't be relying on that for your primary damage. There is a fact that enemies can sometimes sneak in between your strikes and get right in front of Haggar's face to basically hit you, and for some odd reason, the punch won't register a hit when you attack those enemies that are up close. For the most part, Haggar fights pretty much as a mid-range fighter. He is pretty good up close with throws, but you do not want to be prioritizing that a whole lot. But technically, Haggar's probably got the hardest infinite to do, which is only 1 hit to use. So unfortunately, when you fight with Haggar and try to do infinites with him, it will be a very difficult struggle. It does take quite a bit of practice. Think of infinites, aka shifting, as a rhythm game. Technically, you want to find the right balance of speed and timing for your hits. Otherwise, you won't get you'll lose control of your hits pretty quickly. Unfortunately, I'm playing this on the Wii U VC. It may not be the best recommended for the versions, but Haggar probably has pretty high damage. But there's a lot of enemies that can easily break out of the Infinite, especially Philippe, Relento, and Ratu. Technically, if you were playing like Super Nintendo versions or other versions that doesn't have that kind of slowdown like the Wii U VC does, or the Wii VC, that would be a good place to start for the most part. I've yet to try those games on the other one. It could be the Japanese version might be a little bit more better option, but I never played the Japanese version, so unfortunately I can't really say for sure that's actually way better than the US version. Most of my runs have been done on the US International. So anyway, now that we covered his chain attacks, let's go over his jump attacks. For stationary, you can, and forward jumps, you can do the drop kick. And backward jump, you can do the reverse splash. And when you do a forward or stationary down attack, you do the body splash. Both of these attacks deal 1 point higher than your punches for the chain attack. So you can like mix that up with throw damage and grapple strike damage. So that's always nice to have. Once you figure out all the damage formula for the enemies, that is. By all accounts, you want to be using the body splash. The only time you should probably do the drop kick is if they're not at the edge of the screen. But at the same time, you need to be careful not to knock the enemies off the screen. You want to keep them on screen and be able to beat them up pretty easily. But anyway, let's go over grapple strikes / throws. Haggar has a 3 headbutt attack that he does that racks up a lot of damage. The third one's probably tied with the extra joy and the suplex. So basically, combine that damage with the other 2 headbutts, and you can get pretty much a very high damage ratio with that. Probably higher than Maki and Carlos's knee strikes. The next throw I'm going to show you is his forward back throw. This is basically the suplex or brain buster, depending on which version you want to call it in Pro Wrestling Lingo. And basically that has the same damage as the third headbutt as well as the extra joy. One problem with this is it does take 1 to 2 seconds for the move to finish. So it does give some enemies some time to move out of the way. Let's see if I can get it. See right there, they were able to move out of the way. So that's very difficult to set up grouping tactics with Haggar, since that is an issue. Plus, the impact range of the enemy being thrown is kind of big, so if it hits any of the enemies coming right towards you, they might get knocked off screen instead. So be very careful when doing the suplex. Next up is the extra joy. Extra joy is Haggar's old lariat, which Zangief copied off of. Pretty much. Of course, the 2 characters in their respective lore have been known to infamously copy one another's movesets. So basically, this is Haggar's overall damage. This covers all the enemies on the plane that's in front of him, as well as some of the enemies that are above him, and some of the enemies that are below him on the plane levels. We use this method called Chain Joy. I'll show you that in a minute. And basically, Chain Joys are basically moves that you can combine your chain attack with an extra joy. So I'll use it all right here. And that basically deals more damage to the Elias than normal. So basically, chain joys are a pretty good way to get some extra damage out, but at the same time, you want to be very careful when using them because you are going to be using quite a bit of health, pretty much, and you do not want to be abusing it every time. Probably the best time to do a chain joy is pretty much when you want to take out a whole group of enemies doing an infinite, and you can rack up a lot of damage pretty quickly because that adds like 10 extra points as opposed to doing a regular chain with Haggar. Anyway, let's go back and reset on here. And anyway, we're going to go one final grapple strike and probably Haggar's strongest attack in the entire game, the spinning pile driver. Of course, if you're a big fan of Haggar, Haggar had a regular pile driver in Final Fight 1. Here in Final Fight 2 and onwards, he gets the spinning pile driver, which is pretty much the same damage as your normal pile driver, pretty much, but with the added spin. Of course, this is Haggar's ripoff of that move. Aside from being used for offense purposes, you can also use it defensively and to help you get into good position. Let's see if I can grab one of these enemies. No. Well, that kind of failed. But technically, you can also use the attack as a defensive move as well. You can use this to counter acrobat enemies that leap at you or enemies that are coming at you at the side. For the most part, you can actually use that to basically protect Haggar from enemies that might try to gang up on him or try to close in on him. For the most part, you don't want to be using the pile driver a whole lot during the runs. You definitely want to use it to position your character when you're getting ready to move to the next screen, or protect yourself from enemies that might try to close in on you. Now, there is one thing I want to go over with the body splash real quick before we move forward with other tactics, is that most of the time you can literally knock these enemies to the opposite direction of where Haggar is. Normally it would go the opposite way of going the opposite direction. But for the most part, you can always knock these enemies around, and you can definitely set them up for this. Because right there, you can basically move them forward rather than backward. And that's a pretty good way to get some of these enemies to group together. So, because the suplex is very unreliable, I would strongly recommend using the reverse body splash whenever possible. You can also do this with forward body splash too. So you can use that as a pretty interesting grouping tool. It's probably not nearly as effective as throwing enemies right into each other, but it's a very good method. But technically, like I said before, it's very difficult to do very fast infinites on this version of Final Fight 2. I have seen someone do a much faster leap fight. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move forward towards going to 1-1 just to give you a general idea of what happens when you fight enemies with Haggar and try to use this tag against bosses. Basically, you want to prioritize not using your changeaways a whole lot, but you can also use that to get rid of enemies more quickly. You can also cancel your infinites and do grapple strikes for finish if you know the damage formula for the most part. Well, that wasn't bad right there. But as you can see right here, we want to be jumping all the time because Haggar moves more faster doing that, actually. Yeah, sometimes when you do infinites with characters, you might actually inadvertently activate your final hit with the chain attack rather than doing an actual hit. Yeah, that happens sometimes, but it really depends on button mashing speed and all. So anyway, once we get to 1-1, I'll show you how we do things with the infinite. Like I said before, infinites are going to be your primary damage dealer, but you can always substitute that for other methods to finish off your enemies if you don't want to be burning out your hands. Anyway, we got one more set of enemies to deal with before we fight 1-1. So see right here, I didn't bother to go for the infinites, but I went ahead and did this. I'm going to go ahead and create a restore point right here. So we're going to try to infinite 1-1 with Haggar. As you can see right here, I got caught with the frame storage trap right there, and that unfortunately happens sometimes. You can also substitute that last hit with a extra joy, and you can basically finish them off quickly. But technically, we got a freebie with Won because Won's not very fast on the attacking unless our control mashing is pretty poor. But anyway, that pretty much covers Haggar in a nutshell for this guide. Basically, you want to prioritize mastering the infinite with Haggar. But there's other methods, like if you can calculate the damage from all the attacks you do, not to mention calculate jump attack damage with your grapple strikes and throws, you can probably get your maximum amount of damage that way. Anyway, I'm going to take a small break, get me some water, and then we'll cover Maki next.